Good evening. Going to call to order the Wednesday, August 17th meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority. Like to have a roll call and determination of a quorum, please.
Chairperson Golden,
Here.
Vice Chair Pulitz,
Present.
Treasurer Rogers, Member Jones, Member Hamilton,
Here.
Member Hutter,
Present.
Member Norvell.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Fantastic. Carl, we haven't seen you in ages.
Is that so?
Yeah, I haven't seen you in ages. Can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move on to item number C here, approval of the past minutes of the Airport Authority meeting. Any members of the Airport Authority have any comments on those minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Fantastic. We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes of the past Airport Authority meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. The minutes from the last Airport Authority meeting are approved. Modification of the agenda, there will be none. We have 2 items on this evening's agenda and only 1 with public participation, so we'll just go right into it after we hit another couple of things. Public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak at this time on any agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires additional discussion, please request the same of me, and I'll calendar the matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. Any members of the public care to opine on any matter this evening before we get into our agenda? Going once? Twice? Okay, we're done with that. Airport Engineers Report. Corey, do we have Nadine on the line tonight? Okay.
Hello, Nadine.
Nadine,
Hi, I'm here.
how you
Good
doing?
evening. Good, how are you?
Good. You want to give us a brief?
Yes, I have an update for you. So just going down the list here on the project update list. The AWAS relocation construction, as you all know, has been completed, and we're in the process of closing out all final payments and reimbursement of the grant associated with this project. So no action items on that, but it will be completely completed soon. The snow removal equipment still kind of waiting on delivery, of course, and the last update I got was that excuse me, the delivery is tentatively scheduled for September or October as of right now. Unfortunately, last update it was August or September, so it is getting pushed a little bit, little by little. But we're getting more frequent updates now, so it is looking better that the September to October timeframe is realistic. And then when that does come around, Mike Dickin will be available to participate in the acceptance and training of the equipment. The design The design project for the nighttime approach system, we are working on closing out the phase 1, which is the 30% design. There's a few pending items associated with that, and one of them is just closing out the grant itself. The timing of it, because the grant for phase 2 is on the way, the FAA wants to have that phase 1 closed out pretty quickly and in line with getting phase 2 grant funding. So part of that, and Corey and I are working on it, but part of that is removing this obstacle or tree that's out there in the approach surface on BLM land. So that's one of the things we're working on. We did have an update meeting with Lean Engineering on the 4th, so 2 Thursdays ago, and the 30% design is complete. It's just a matter of getting everything that submitted to the FAA that they need. As far as that phase one 30% design goes, it's completely complete. It's just a matter of making sure the FAA has what they need to get the grant closed out. The next meeting we have, the next update meeting we have with Lean and the FAA is actually tomorrow. And we'll have more information about, and I guess a better direction with the second phase of the design, where we can go with it and what exactly we need to include on that second phase after tomorrow, after we talk with all the players, especially the FAA. It sounds like the grant funding for phase two of the design is en route, so that's good. No anticipated hangups there. And then again, the snow removal equipment building, no real update there. And kind of moving along with everything else there. There's no real unexpected items or surprises as of right now. But any questions you have, I can try and answer.
Anybody from the airport authority have any questions for Nadine? Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much, Nadine. We appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank
Nadine.
you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Okay. Consent agenda. We don't have one this evening, so we're going to move into public hearings. First item is for discussion and possible action to approve Stellar Aviation of Carson City as a Class 2 FBO, providing line services, aircraft storage, and operational management of the CTE FBO. Stellar would like to operate an FBO based at Carson Tahoe Executive, designated as a Class 1 FBO. So, Corey or Steve Takis, would either one of you like to lead the discussion on this?
This is Corey, airport manager. First of all, I need to apologize to everybody here today. I made a mistake in this memo. In the executive summary, it states that the Class 2 FBO fee of $1,200 per year, that is actually incorrect. That was updated, and I wasn't aware of that update. So both to Stellar, I haven't told y'all this. This is new information for y'all. It's actually $1,800 annually. And I'm sorry, that was an update that I wasn't aware of. But that was brought to my attention before the meeting today. So, moving forward, so you have already introduced the item. Stellar Aviation has submitted adequate financial statements, adequate credit reports for the owner's estimated expenses for the first 6 months of operations, proof of insurance, and copies of all required certificates and business licenses. They are aware of the requirements of Title 19 and the Class 2 FBO fee of $1,800. I have some additional information here. So they have submitted their permit application. In my opinion and in Takis's, it does meet all of the requirements of Title 19, and they have submitted all of the supporting documents. Some of those supporting documents, I'm going to go through the list straight out of Title 19 here. So there's a requirement to present financial statements prepared by a certified public accountant. This is not applicable because this is a new company. What they have done is they have submitted proof of funds that do meet the requirements, and they've also written a statement guaranteeing that they will cover those expenses, and that is included in the board packet. That document also covers a couple of other items on this list. They have presented a statement that shows expenses for at least a 6-month period, and then the statement that they presented with their financials meets that 6-month requirement. Written list of assets. They did provide a written list of assets. that they will be utilizing to accomplish the business. They provided a current credit report for the owners. That is not included in the packet to protect the individual's personal information, but it was adequate and it meets all of the requirements. It is not applicable for them to submit any licenses or certifications from the FAA because none of the operations would require that at this time. They have provided evidence of adequate insurance coverage. They have also proved that the facility they will be operating out of will be adequate to do their operation. So they'll be operating out of the current Sterling Air building, and it has met all of the FBO requirements. And then, of course, they've agreed to the airport rules and regulations. And that is all of the requirements for the permit application, which they've definitely met. I have a lot more detail here about Title 19 and how they meet all of the requirements of Title 19. I'm prepared to present that. I don't think it's necessary. I can say that they do meet all of the requirements in Title 19. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Takis to add a couple more items.
Liquid, I don't think we need to go through the,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to take us through, but just so you understand the process we go through, the Title 19 includes a whole bunch of conditions, and they're written in the negative. They basically say you shall not grant an application if the following is true, and we went through each of those criteria. We do that for everybody who applies for an FBO license, whether they're just renting hangars, they're doing a flight school, whatever. We go through the same analysis, and as Corey said, we went through that analysis, and they're okay in all departments. A couple of additional things I just want to mention, as Corey mentioned, we didn't request financial statements because they pointed out to us the entity that they're using is a newly created entity, Stellar Aviation of Carson City, so it won't have any financials yet. So they did something which we've accepted from other applicants, which is the principals have basically showed us they have credit worthiness and they have funds on hand, and they can cover at least 6 months of operations, which is the standard in Title 19. So that's all covered. A couple of things I did want to point out, they do have the leases and the agreements in place with Carson Tao Executive to operate as the manager of their FBO. Some of those provisions, when you look through it, you'll probably see were redacted, and that was in my discussions with their counsel. It's not really relevant to the airport authority's consideration what the monetary arrangement is between the two entities. And so they did provide me an unredacted copy, and what's been redacted is really just the compensation arrangement. And so other than that, you have the full view that you need to see to approve that portion of the arrangement. Couple of other things in their agreement, and the agreement was originally done with Carson Tao Executive with a different subsidiary of Stellar Aviation, but then they assigned it to Stellar Aviation of Carson City. So we get to the same place. But when you look at that agreement, which was written some time ago, it talks about truck-to-truck fueling. That's not permitted on our airport. I don't think it's permitted in any airport. There are environmental considerations that basically prevent that from occurring. We've discussed that with them, and they've told us, no, we're not going to be doing that. So one of the things you should probably do is get them to confirm that to you while they're here today. The other thing is this application is for them to do a variety of FBO activities, manage the Carson Tao Executive operation, rent hangars, sell fuel. But the sell fuel, you got to start someplace. So this is the portion where they get the FBO license to sell fuel, but they still need to build the fuels facility and have the facility in place before they can actually start doing that. And so I'm just pointing out to you, there's a couple of things you need to do, and you can't, we don't want to say you can't get any of these approvals until you get them all together. That doesn't really make sense. So this gives them the FBO authority to sell fuel, but as a practical matter, they won't be selling fuel until they get the facility in place. And they're well on their way in that process as well. I think that's all that I had to add to what Corey said. And if you have any questions, of course, Corey and I are here to answer them, and certainly you should hear from Brad or whomever is going to speak for Stellar.
I'd like to add a couple points of clarification, so if anyone's confused on the airport authority, this should really easily clarify it. The premises is a Class 1 FBO as it stands today, where this is located. The issue is the owner of the premises is not the operator. So the operator is applying for the Class 1 FBO permit. Hopefully that makes sense. So the premises is approved to do this. It's the operator that's applying because they're not the premises owner. So one thing we discussed in our last meeting, and I want to bring this up because we're going to have to send the applicant a bill to this effect. Title 19, 02020.300, subsection 3B, provides for any party that applies to the airport authority to operate on the airport shall reimburse the authority for the costs of any engineering review and legal review performed in conjunction with the application of any amendment thereof. And we had discussed this, if you recall, in our last meeting due to the legal fees that we were incurring. And so for this application, Steve, please make sure that you get a summary of your time and billings to Corey, just exclusive to this. And then, Corey, you need to send a bill to the applicant for it.
All of my bills have detailed descriptions in them, so it should be relatively easy to do that. And I think this kind of came to a head when we were working on Carson Tahoe Executive, looking at leasing property, because as John Rogers, our treasurer, pointed out at a previous meeting, we spent a ton of time and money trying to help make that happen and going through the application and refining things. And that was something that the airport ended up picking up, because they didn't bill it back. And billing back stuff is not part of my job duty. The only bills that I'm involved in are the bills that I send you for my time. But you should have in place some process to make sure that those get redirected to the extent you're supposed to be reimbursed. I wanted to mention one other thing if I could, but I really appreciate the new timeframes you put on agenda items, because this is a good example. There were a handful of things that were incomplete in the application, and they were easy things for us to get rectified because we had the time to do it. If the application that we originally got were given to us at the 11th hour, we might be stuck in the same situation where there really isn't time to address things. And they're simple things like credit reports, where just the copy that we had cut off the very bottom part that showed the credit score, which was just a simple thing for us to check to make sure they're credit worthy. And those are all things that were easily remedied. Insurance was, there was a variation in the name of the insurance that had to be fixed, things like that. And when we have the time to fix them, it's easy to get them fixed, and then you can go forward on the agenda. But thank you for doing that.
Okay. Before I open this up to comments from my counterparts, just one matter of correction for the record. I had tried to simplify this for everybody to understand. So the building, the Sterling Air building, is a Class 1 FBO. The applicant is applying as a Class 2 FBO because they're not the building owner. So they're the operator. So
The Carson Tahoe Executive is a Class 1 FBO. They hold that lease, formerly the Sterling Air lease. Many people refer to it.
and
But
that lease
that's the
has
lease.
that lease has all these rights in it.
Correct.
So Carson Tahoe Executive wouldn't have to come to us today if they were wanting to operate this, but they have
Right.
let this out to a third party to operate, and the third party is before us asking for the same rights that run with the premises. So this really is a non-event for all intents and purposes. That in mind, any comments from members of the Airport Authority? Harlow?
Well, maybe a question for Brad. I'm just thinking about the ramp area in front of the building. Have you given some thought to that? As far as the future is concerned?
Thank you, Brad. You know how to turn it on, correct? Okay.
To answer your question, we have to protect the amount of tie-down spaces that we have currently right now, but we also do have to open the ramp up for transient customers that are coming into and out of the facility. So there will be a time where we're going to have to come forward to the board with a plan so that we have adequate parking for all aircraft, because we have to basically provide for everybody, GA customers, jet customers, helicopter activity, and everything else. And the idea is just to go forward as partners to try and best develop that area. I know that you guys have some big plans to try and change that entrance and do some things with the terminal building, and we'd love to help get involved in that in any way we can. But at the end of the day, we have to protect the amount of tie-down spaces that we have in that area right now. Although they're not all full, our goal and our hope is to get everything full that's out there, whether it's a combination of parking spaces for light jets that are coming in and also for the GA community that's there, maybe some areas for heavy jets, maybe working out a deal with the existing terminal to try and pay as we go for leasing space there if we have to park airplanes, that type of stuff.
Pardon me. State your name for the record, please.
Sure, it's Brad Cost. Thank you, sorry about that. Should have done that first.
So you wouldn't try to park a corporate aircraft on that ramp that has the general aviation tie-downs?
To answer your question, Harlow, yes, we would.
Oh.
We are going to make room for them there, but I'm going to try and protect the amount of tie-down spaces that we have right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, just to kind of back up to the comment that was made, or the clarification that was made earlier about fuel activity. When we first started this conversation some months ago, I seem to recall very specifically that prior to such a time that a fuel farm for Stellar could be built, that there was contemplation of truck-to-truck fueling, creation of a environmental containment pad that a large tanker could be parked on to do truck-to-truck. So, I think it's restating what's already been said, but it sounds like that somewhere in the interim has been scratched, and we're going to go straight from no fuel operations to Stellar Fuel Farm.
Well, we are already pretty far down the road on the design and survey and planning for the fuel farm. I want to just make sure that I'm crystal clear on this, and maybe Corey, you can help me out with it. I'm not aware of anything on the airport or any regulation that would prevent us from doing truck-to-truck transfers. However, there are several environmental and safety precautions that need to be put in place prior to doing anything with that. Some airports approve it, some airports do not. It usually is very heavily relied upon the fire marshal and also the environmental people. It's not normally done at a board meeting like this. It would be the people from the controlling entity doing it. However, if the answer comes back that we are not going to be doing that, we'll abide by that, and we'll work towards getting the fuel farm in place.
This is the clarification that I'm going towards, and I'm glad I asked the question.
Yep.
So in your mind, you have not taken that off the table. You have not been told that that is prohibited or would be prohibited, nor have you sought specific approval for those kinds of activities. Because I do recall, I may be incorrect, but I thought that some of the earlier conversation with the fire marshal was around exploring Carson City Fire Department or fire marshals' general approach and view on that from their standpoint.
That is correct. That was the initial plan, was to do that. However, what I believe in my mind is after 2.5, almost 3 years of doing nothing but truck-to-truck transfers in Reno at the airport. And there's a lot of people on this board that have visited our facilities and know what we're doing that's there. We came into Reno just 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago. We went from 0 gallons to now we're pumping over 3 million gallons of fuel. We've almost doubled the amount of jet fuel sold at the airport by new business that's there, and I'm doing all of that by truck-to-truck transfers. So it's not that it's prohibited for me operationally. If I don't have the proper containment and the proper safety mechanisms in place and the approvals from any overriding authority, I'm not going to do it, nor would I ever recommend it to this board. And that's that would be my opinion on it. No one I'd believe until heard tonight, Steve, no one's told me that I can't do it.
Well, that's why I'm asking this, because I would love to get some clarification on what the scope of that comment was.
But I am familiar and I am comfortable that we would need to come to the board to get approval to dispense fuel in any capacity. So that's when I would believe that discussion would be had. But what we're trying to do is move forward with the fuel farm as expeditiously as possible, because that's the right way to do things. And that's what we want to do.
Corey, I'm going to defer to you and Steve. If you could just, for Carl's benefit, clarify what you've discussed regarding.
This is different than what we understood. And candidly, I thought you guys had told us directly you would not be doing fuel to fuel. This approval was not presented to the airport authority to allow you to do truck-to-truck fueling. And so if you plan to do it at some point, you need to come back in front of this authority and get permission to do it. They're not approving that in this application. That wasn't part of your application.
Understood. I
Yeah.
completely understand
So-
that, and that's an excellent point of clarification. I'm not here to ask for
Yeah.
that, nor are we
It was
even
for
going to go down that
Carl's
road.
benefit.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
there's
No.
there's one
I
other
didn't want
matter.
to, just want to make sure. I didn't want you to think that I was doing that. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
switch things.
we have been told, and please don't interject here, I just want to hear from Corey. We've been told that this is a federal matter at the EPA level, that it's prohibited.
Yeah, so there's nothing in Title 19 that prohibits truck-to-truck fueling.
Right.
It is just really cost prohibitive to an operator to actually do something like that, and the approvals that they need to actually get are really steep. So that's why you typically don't see it at airports. We've definitely been talking about this topic, and I've made it very clear that this is not an approval for truck-to-truck fueling. This FBO permit application is not an application for fueling rights. They'll have to go through that process separately, and if they wanted to go the route of truck-to-truck fueling, it would be a very steep regulatory hurdle for them to clear, and since they're moving forward so quickly on building a fuel farm that's going to have its own containment and all of that, if they were to start an engineering project to build the necessary containment for truck to truck, at this point, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But they technically could present that proposal to the airport if they wanted to pursue that, and they would just simply have to meet all of the EPA requirements necessary to do that, and then we could authorize it if they meet all of those requirements.
Does that clarify that for you?
It certainly does. And to be clear, I think, it's been said a couple times, I fully understand that fueling rights are not what are being applied for tonight, understood. But I did want on the record to clarify what you just said and have you say that, and thank you, because I thought I heard earlier, truck to truck is not approved at this airport, not approved at most airports or all airports or something like that. And I think you've clarified that that's not what was said, but rather there are steep regulatory hurdles that may make it cost prohibitive. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think we've covered that enough. Carl, anything else on your end? Okay, Paul, any questions? No questions. Stan? Tim?
Somewhat a comment and a question. So, just so I fully understand, should Stellar get the FAA required approvals to do whatever kind of fueling they want to do, there's nothing in their lease that prohibits us from not allowing that in their lease options. Am I correct, Mr. Takis?
That's correct, but their lease and Title 19 and pretty much everything else we operate on say that all actions must be compliant with all laws, including
Understood.
federal
So-
laws.
and that's
And
why I
most of
under-
these
yeah.
are federal environmental.
That's what I understood. So if Stellar is able to get city, county, state, federal, FAA, blah, 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 and they can meet all those things, there doesn't appear to be a roadblock in writing that we have to deal with outside of that. We could just take that information and have a vote to approve that service once we get all those specific approvals.
Right.
And regardless of all their cost, the cost is in their hands to do all that, of course.
It's not ours.
It's
But-
not ours. Yeah, right.
But
So-
yeah, if they were to do that,
Yeah.
but the application at hand doesn't.
Oh, I know. No, we're
contemplate
not
that.
talking about this application, but it's like step 1, step 2, step 3. So this is basically for Stellar, this
Step
is
one.
kind of like step 3, because first CTE takes over the lease of the FBO and they get started, and then we realize down the road that they start off with a lease to Stellar, then all of a sudden it becomes Stellar of Carson City. So there's been like a few transitions going on. We're going to clean up a lot of that today. We're going to make it so now they're able to operate with the proper legal approvals, and now they can go forward with trying to provide more services at their own pace. Is that what I understand, Mr.?
That is absolutely correct. And
Okay.
if I could add to that, just a quick comment. This process has been very enlightening to me, and I have a lot of appreciation for not only your distinguished counsel's time that he's put into everything, but Corey's time, and also the consideration of all board members here. So I've learned a lot going through it, and I really feel that we've put up the effort in the backside of this to get everything ready to go. And we are very, very excited to start work out at the airport as soon as we meet all of the criteria that you need us to.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else from your firm, would you like to have anyone else speak on behalf of your company, or would?
I think we're good.
I want to give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. I would say we look forward to your investment. Anything else we need to discuss on the matter? Well, then, if we could, entertain a motion to approve Stellar Aviation of Carson City as a Class II FBO, providing line services, aircraft storage, and operational management of the CTE FBO.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve the Class II FBO permit application for Stellar Aviation.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Thank you.
Stan?
Yes. I think Stan was our second, but that's okay. Motion and a second to approve the Stellar Aviation FBO application of Carson City as a Class II FBO, providing line services, aircraft storage, and operational management of the CTE FBO. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. If you folks need anything from us, you know how to reach out. Best of luck.
Thank you all very much. We look forward to a long and prosperous future for all of us. Appreciate it.
Fair enough. And you're welcome to stick around for the next topic, but you're welcome to leave too. If I were you, I know what I'd be doing. Okay, item number 2 under public hearings this evening. Yeah. Hey, Harlow? Can you send him back, Brad? We'll we're going to go on. I think Harlow might be out for a while. Item number 2, Harlow, is that you? Great. It's an unfortunate situation. I'm going to turn this over to Corey. It's Airport Authority review and determination of penalty to two parties for violations of the driving rules and unsafe use of an off-highway vehicle on the airport. We can, as an airport authority, shorten the suspension of driving privileges or revoke driving privileges or take another course of action. This was an opportunity for the two parties who were accused of this to be present. Neither has chosen to be present. Both are in absentia, obviously. Corey, if you could give us a brief summary of this matter.
I'm going to
Okay,
take this
Steve,
on.
all yours.
Steve Takis, Airport Council. So the short version is from the evidence that staff put together, it appears that Mr. Rybisel and Sampson went for a joyride in an off-highway vehicle, side by side, at high rate of speed, went across the runway, across the active runway and the active taxiway, disabled their OHV by hitting a rock, and then went out and retrieved it and drove away and didn't report anything to us. There's a variety of airport driving rules that the airport authorities adopted and just regular Carson City traffic rules that were violated in doing that. They exceeded the speed limit on the airport. They were driving on areas that are not designed for vehicles to be driving. The bottom line is the evidence that was put together by staff was what allowed us to identify who the people were. The thing started out with Rick doing his daily runway maintenance and seeing tracks across the runway. Well, the only person that should be driving a vehicle across the runway would be Rick or the airport manager. Nobody else should be driving a motor vehicle across the runway. And so that, of course, heightened sensitivity of Rick as to, well, what happened here? And so we followed the tracks, could see where the tracks went, ultimately went back to our camera system, both the gate card system and our camera that shoots out across the runway, and was able to piece together the pieces of Mr. Rybisel entering the airport and where you can clearly identify his clothing, and then Mr. Sampson entering the airport, you can identify his clothing and their vehicles, and then the vehicle moving quickly across the far side of the airport, and then the two of them walking back from that area in which Mr. Sampson retrieves his vehicle and takes his empty trailer out there, and then the subsequent video of Mr. Sampson pulling his OHV out of there, or whatever OHV, whoever it belongs to. It's not a licensed vehicle. And there you can see on the video that the tires are flat now and the thing is a bit damaged. And so staff put this together. Corey and I consulted on this. The airport driving rules provide for someone, if you violate the rules, the airport manager is supposed to suspend your driving privileges for a certain amount of time. We thought, given the severity of what they did and the fact that they didn't own up to it or, act like responsible individuals, come and when we confronted them, say, hey, okay, look, I screwed up. We all make mistakes. I'm certainly in that group of people that make mistakes. And the responsible thing is you own up to what you've done, you take responsibility, you apologize, and you move on. They've taken a very different approach, which is trying to deny any facts that we put up. And now, admittedly, one of the facts was a little bit off in my original letter to them because our investigation was on the 27th, and I thought the event was on the 27th. Had I looked more closely at the timestamps on the camera shots, the event was actually on the 26th. And so Mr. Rybisel immediately responded to us, well, I wasn't driving any OHV on the 27th. And okay, maybe not, maybe no one was driving one on the 27th, but he pretty clearly knew what we were talking about. And so he continued to kind of maintain that he had no responsibility, and instead he asked us to lift the suspension for him. And of course, our response is, your opportunity to modify that suspension is in front of you guys, because the driving regulations say that when that suspension occurs, the airport managers to do it and to do it relatively immediately, that they have a right to appeal that to all of you and have you make the decision. So we just fast forwarded it and said, okay, look, let's just go affirmatively put it in front of the authority. They'll have their opportunity to make their pitch, and you guys will decide ultimately what's the appropriate penalty. 120-day suspension of their driving privileges on the airport, which is what they currently sit with, or something greater or more. Mr. Ribasel seems to argue a distinction between riding in the, participating by being a passenger versus the person who's actually driving the vehicle. I think that's the kind of excuse that a principal in a school would probably throw out and say, come on, guys, if you're both participating in the action, the fact that one of you is behind the wheel and the other one is riding along with them consensually, nobody's got a gun to his head or anything, you both should bear some responsibility. But that's the pitch that he's essentially made. He did give us a letter, which was in your packet, basically, or an email rather, saying that he didn't think he should be penalized and he wants it reinstated. And of course, he demanded that we reinstate it immediately. And Corey did the right thing as airport manager, referred him to me, because as soon as we do a suspension, it really becomes a legal matter and I really should be the point person. I tried to obtain information from him along the lines of, let's just get this resolved. However, he didn't see it that way. I think he thought I was trying to trick him into saying something, or I don't know what he was thinking. But he was pretty resistant on the facts. And so that's what you have in front of you. I have to say, part of the concern that we have at staff is the way they've handled this. It's, like I said, we all make mistakes. When you own up to them and you take responsibility, we're all reasonable, we move on. Here, they haven't taken that approach, and it makes you think, well, if they're taking the approach that they're taking to this, what approach are they taking when they operate aircraft or do something else on the airfield? That's a concern. And I can tell you right now, as a pilot, and all of you guys feel the same way, if you're a pilot and you're coming into land, the last thing you want to see is a vehicle going across the runway. It's happened to me. It's a frightening experience. You are glad that you've been practicing going around. And the other thing is, seeing an airplane on final when you're on the runway is very difficult. You're looking at the profile of the aircraft, and that's hard to spot. And you guys all know that when you're sitting in the run-up area, you've at least got a little bit of an angle, so you've got a better shot at it. If you move yourself right to the runway and look up that aircraft, you're looking at a pretty thin profile. It's pretty hard to see. And so we don't want people out there doing that. So at any rate, I had identified in the briefing memo a variety of the violations that are there of the driving rules. But the bottom line is, we think staff firmly believes some kind of penalty is appropriate. The penalty we came up with was 120-day suspension. The driving regulations say that you can modify the penalty to whatever you think is fair. Could be more, it could be less. You could go from forget it, staff, we don't think there's enough there for you to do this, and reinstate their driving privileges, to the extreme, which is you just plain revoke their driving privileges. They're not allowed to drive a vehicle in the airport. I've been asked, can you prohibit them from using the airport? And generally speaking, no. It's a public use airport. If they've got a pilot's license, they should be able to fly in and fly out of our airport just like anybody else. But to the extent they have a hangar or something, they need to walk to it. They shouldn't be driving a vehicle on the driving side. So I think that's about what I have. And then Corey has got the videos and can play them for you if you'd like to see them, because you may not have been able to play them when you downloaded. I was able to play them, but I have to tell you that looking at them until you zoom in, it's hard to see the action. It's a broad picture. And so, for example, seeing the vehicle moving at a high rate of speed over there, kind of behind the fuel island area is hard to see. It's out there, you can see it, but it's not, yeah. Yeah.
Let me give a moment to kind of really make this brief, how we got to where we got, and also tell you that I don't want this airport authority to turn into a courtroom where we are judge, jury, and executioner. On the other hand, we have a responsibility to the constituents of the airport, to the users of the airport, to provide a safe environment. It's our fiduciary obligation to do so. And we have to do something here. Corey brought this to my attention the day after it happened. Before speaking with Steve, I eventually told him, hey, you got to bring Steve into this. It's a legal matter. Rick had spotted the tracks from this vehicle and then spotted an area where there was an impact on a large rock that was obscured by brush and shrub and all sorts of goodies out there, grasses. Then there was an area that was spotted that had flat tire marks, like a vehicle driving or being dragged across the runway and causing what you would normally see on a road is flat tire marks, skid marks basically, but widened. So Corey and I started looking at the photos. I told Corey, stop for a second, blow up that photo. And it was this ATV leaving the airport with the two parties involved. And as it was leaving, the photo had the ATV on the trailer. It was a good catch. No one did it intentionally. It was just there. And I said, blow that up. And sure enough, the two left tires, front and rear, were flat. So we knew right then, okay, this was the vehicle that caused this mess. After going through video and still photos that were captured with the airport surveillance system, it became very apparent who was involved in this without question. I don't think we need to show the pictures and look at the video unless someone from the airport authority wants to see it. I think we can all trust Corey has reviewed this at length with Steve.
We have. I want to add one thing because you brought it up. This is not a criminal trial.
No, that's my point.
And if you wanted us to, we haven't recommended this, but if you wanted us to, we could refer this to the DA's office because they have violated some traffic rules, and that could be a treated as a criminal offense by the DA's office. But we're not really interested in escalating it. We're just interested in stopping it.
Right.
And the other thing is, this is a privilege to drive on the airport. Nobody has a right to do it. It's not like we're taking away some inalienable right where they have due process rights to face their accuser and present evidence and do all that other stuff. We're letting them do all that stuff, but that's not the standard. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard is preponderance of the evidence. Is it more likely than not, based on the evidence you've been provided, that this violation occurred and these guys were the guys who were involved in it? That's really all the standard is. And the penalty that we're recommending is simply the removal or the temporary removal of that privilege, not taking away anybody's rights or anything else. And so some of the responses we got back from Mr. Ribasel seem more akin to the kind of response you might give to the DA's office or somebody about, due process rights. The due process rights are right here, right now. They have the ability to come in here, and they've either chosen not to, or there are more important things to them, and they've not doing it.
So let me summarize where we stand and what's going on here. My initial response to Corey when we went through this the afternoon of the 27th, I believe it was, my initial response was, that's it. Knock out their gate cards right now, revoke their driving privileges on the airport. That, to me, is an equitable recourse, if you will, and remedy for what they've done. They've proven that they are a threat to the aviation community. And for the record, I will state, this is not the first problem we have had with one of them. In fact, it's probably problem number 3 or 4 when it comes to vehicular violations of the driving rules on the airport. So my position was yank their driving privileges, cancel out their gate cards. They want to get on the airport, let them go through the man gate and use their 2 legs and feet. The policy, however, that's where I'm heading with this. I was cut off at the knees on that because our own policy says that the penalty should be 120 days unless the airport authority chooses to do otherwise. So it's before us as an airport authority to accept the 120 days or do otherwise. I know where I stand on the matter, but I'm one person. I'm not the airport authority. So with that, I will defer to my counterparts. Stan, go ahead.
One of the individuals has had prior infractions?
Let me address that. No, we don't have prior infractions. We have prior allegations of bad actions on one of the 2.
But we took no
But
discipline.
there's been no finding or fault. A prior airport manager had complained about the behavior of one of them, things like that. But I don't really think that's very relevant to your consideration. If somebody accuses somebody else of doing something, that doesn't have a whole lot of probative value.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
One of the parties involved, I'm not naming names, just
Okay.
saying one of the parties involved had more than one prior altercation with our former manager with regards to operating motor vehicle on the airport. And I was chair of the airport authority at the time. I had to get involved, and I asked everybody to stand down and behave, basically, as opposed to escalating it any further. I guess the point being is one of the 2 of these gentlemen it's not the first time we've had issues with one of them. So.
Well, but by not taking any action, we can't use that on this guy, right?
It's irrelevant in a way.
Right. My recommendation is you do not base your decision on prior allegations.
Harlow?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to establish a couple of things for the record to make sure my understanding is clear. I place a high degree of value on honesty, and as counsel pointed out, when you make a mistake, to immediately own up to it, to take responsibility, and to accept whatever judgment is rendered because of your actions, and do your best to repair that and move on. So, counsel, I believe, if I'm correct in understanding what you said, your letter was dated July 27th?
My letter referred to activities that I said
Okay.
occurred on the evening of July 27th.
So, I guess
Yeah.
my question is for Corey. What day did you notify the chairman that this had happened? Chairman said that you notified him the day after it occurred. So do you remember what day that was? Was it the 26th? Or was it the 26th?
I don't
Was it the-
know the exact day that I notified him, but it was almost immediately after the event happened.
But was it prior to the 27th?
It wasn't prior to the 27th. It was the 27th or later.
The reason I asked that question is that counsel mistakenly referred in his communications with the 2 people that participated in this, that it occurred on the 27th. Their letters back to the airport manager simply state that there was no driving by one of the individuals on the 27th. If this occurred on the 25th, then that's an evasion of sorts, in my judgment. Because if you were going to be straight up about it, you would say, no, this occurred on the 25th. They are referring in their letters to the 27th. So that's evading the fact that it actually happened on the 25th. So they're taking a slight misstatement on your part and saying, oh, we didn't do anything on the 27th, rather than saying, no, this occurred on the 25th, and then try to make their case at least. But it's somewhat evasive, the fact that they reference the 27th, yet do not reference the day that it actually happened,
Which in fact was the 26th.
the 25th.
No, 26th.
Oh, 26th.
26.
Date stamp on the pictures, it was
Okay.
the 26th, and it was discovered
Oh.
by Rick on the morning of the 27th.
I take a dim view of that. I don't think that's right. So I just wanted to establish that. And I think that in that regard, the 120 days would be a minimum. And if the board chose to select a time period greater than that, then I'd like to hear what the other members have to say. But I just wanted to establish the timeline in terms of being honest about what happened on the part of the individuals involved. And that was my comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Harlow. You know, what you said was in line with what I had spoke to Counselor Takis about weeks ago. I said to Steve, you know, why don't they just own up to this and move on?
And
That's
and
what
I
they
guess-
should have done. Just own up to it, move on. We wouldn't be having this discussion this
And
evening.
I guess the other thing is, Counsel, did you personally speak to Mr. Sampson?
No, I
So-
did not.
So he did not make himself available despite attempts to reach out to him?
We mailed to his address. He has not responded. The only thing we got from him was a letter, which Mr. Ribasel brought to us that said that Mr. Ribasel was not driving the OHV on the 27th.
Which is an evasion since the event did not occur on the 27th.
Happened on the 26th, correct.
And so that's concerning.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, if these guys would have just told us about it the next day and apologized, I have a feeling it wouldn't have gone anywhere. We'd have probably just dealt with it right then and there. I mean, I don't know. I'd have, you know, Corey and I would have had to talk about it, but this would have been relatively non-event. But given the fact that they didn't do that, and it concerns us that, geez, a vehicle is driving across our active runway at about 7 p.m. at night as dusk is starting to set in, that's a pretty serious thing.
Did we make note, I guess I could go back and look, at what time official sunset was on the 26th? Because if any of you had ever landed at Carson City
Oh,
with the
I know
sun
what
in
you're
your face,
thinking. The sun's in your eye.
you can barely see the runway, much
Yeah,
less
and-
what might be on
And
it.
let me state, I've just reviewed again with Vice Chair Pewitz the video just now while you were speaking, Harlow. These two were going at an incredibly high rate of speed. I'm thinking easily 45, 50 miles an hour. Easy. And we can see where they hit the obstruction that blew out their tires in the video. This is a serious matter. There's no question
I guess
about
from
it.
this board member standpoint, I place a high degree of value on honesty,
So do
and
I.
that appears to be lacking here.
Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Harlow. Carl, do you have anything you want to opine on?
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot more to add here. I think these are folks who certainly know better. They know what this airport's about. They know what the severity of risk to life their own and others in crossing the active runway, which I think is a big piece of this. And I will echo Harlow's comment, that it's ridiculous to be playing games with our council about the date, and otherwise, kind of being coy about this. And I completely support the 120 days.
Can I just answer the question? I just looked it up. Sunset on July 26th, 2022 is when this happened, was at 7:46. So this was before sunset, but it was pretty darn close to it. So the sun must have been pretty low in the sky.
Tim and Stan, do you gentlemen want to add anything to this?
Well, as this is Tim Pulis, and as far as a pilot's concerned, yeah, I'm very concerned about this. And I think that was the responses we got from Mr. Ribzel and what's his name? The other fellow, Sampson, was just a diversion. They weren't, no, they didn't, like, the letter was stating that Mr. Ribzel was not driving on the 27th. It doesn't say he wasn't in the vehicle participating. So it's not a denial of activity, in my opinion. And plus, we've got him. I mean, we got him all over the place. I commend the staff for doing such a thorough job. And, I personally, I think I'm going to just support the sanctions that are in place at this point. That's what I would favor. Seems to be reasonable at this point. Most likely, it should be worse. It should be tougher. But at this point, based on what's been provided for, I think we should consider just doing that at this point. That's my comment.
Stan?
Well, I think it's a pretty serious violation myself, and I'm not a pilot, and I don't want to poo-poo this. I think 120 days is probably the minimum, really. But I think we got to use this as a learning factor. I mean, any infraction we have, we got to take action. We can't just ignore it or say, well, don't do it again. And I think because we didn't do something in the past, it prohibits us from doing something more severe now. That's the way I feel.
Now, before I hand this over to Paul, I do want to say one final word about this. I'm sorry. This was just a complete disregard for safety on this airport. A complete violation of the driving rules, unequivocal. You can't even argue with it after what we've seen in the way of the surveillance video and still photos. And like I said, my initial response was just revoke their driving privileges and pull their gate guards. I cannot support letting this go at 120 days. I think that's a slap on the wrist.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just not cutting off Paul, but backing up, maybe to add one thing to my comment, in saying I support the 120-day suspension, I'm saying that and said that with a tone of, I'm supporting our airport manager's decision, recognizing that per the regulations, the airport manager has the ability to levy up to 120 days. I'm certainly open to something above and beyond that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
May I make one additional comment?
Of course. And then we got to let Paul opine.
I'm sorry, Paul.
No, go.
Forgive me. Whatever length of time, the board sets will be what it is. I think before this should be part of our ruling that if we decide to reinstate driving privileges after some point of time, that both individuals should come to the airport manager's office, should discuss truthfully what happened, and should be instructed by the airport manager, and I might even suggest, Mr. Chairman, your presence.
Happily.
And have a frank, open, and honest discussion about what happened and what is required to remediate that. If they're unwilling to do that, then I would say the suspension should be permanent.
One of the things
Right.
that had crossed my mind, and I know we don't have this, but maybe we should in this case, is an airport driving test for them. No, I mean, it sounds crazy, but other airports have it before they issue a gate card.
Well, one of the clear tenets of repentance is to acknowledge what you've done wrong,
Absolutely.
to accept responsibility for it, and then attempt to make whatever restitution is possible. And if they are not willing to accept responsibility and to frankly and openly discuss what happened on the 26th, then I would say that we hold reinstatement in abeyance until that occurs. And then they should be instructed on how to properly drive, on the airport in accordance with the driving rules adopted by the airport authority, by the airport manager. But again, I would suggest your presence there.
Oh,
Mr.
I will
Chairman.
participate at your suggestion, and perhaps you can join me.
I'm just a guy at the end of the row,
Okay.
but that's just my suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Harlow. Paul?
Well, I tend to agree with everyone else's evaluation of this. And I know Takes did say that we shouldn't involve any previous occurrences. However, previously, there have been some very serious driving complications here. And there's a pattern. And the pattern sounds the same as what we're seeing here. So that's all I'm going to say, but obviously, I don't think that they should be driving on this airport.
But may I add, Mr. Chairman, that even if there was not a pattern, this is serious enough on the
no.
face alone. My example to Member Hutter was that his corporate aircraft is arriving full of company employees at a particularly difficult time of day because of the angle of the sun. Employees who are valuable to the company, who have families, it could be a tragedy unparalleled in the history of the airport,
No question
even
about it.
if there had been nothing happen in the past. But the dishonesty surrounding it troubles me greatly.
Harlow, would you like to make a motion?
I have one more
Well-
Yes, sir.
comment. I'm sorry, it's just tacking on. Basically, what I'd like to say is that I would support what our airport manager recommends I think that we have to listen to his comments. He's our manager. He's the one we hold responsible. I think that I'd like to hear from him as to what he feels is, at this point, fair and equitable. I do love Harlow's idea that reinstatement comes with an acknowledgement of guilt, but
Sentence.
of some type of acknowledgement that they did actually participate, even though we know they did. But I would like to hear from the manager because I think that we hold him responsible for the safety of the airport.
Sure, thank you. So this is probably one of the most severe violations of airport regulations that we've got, short of some criminal activity. This driving on the runway is putting people's lives at risk. I just want to make sure I stress that this is not a small violation. This is very serious. However, Title 19 gives me the authority to issue something stricter than 120 days. I made the choice not to do that and to bring it here to the board today. I think that if there's going to be something stricter than 120 days, which is defined in Title 19, that decision should be made by the board. So I don't want to put a time on that. We're here today because I'd really like the board to make that decision.
Mr.
Corey, and let me also add to that, again, to reiterate, both of the offending parties, and we know they're the offending parties. Hell, we have photos and pictures and video of them. There's no question who these people are, okay? They were given the opportunity to be here today to appeal this matter, to tell their side of the story. They chose not to. In fact, their written statement, each one of them was about 2 sentences long, just denying any involvement. So that to me says it all. And Harlow brings up a great point, and that it could have been Carl. It could have been
my
it could have been anyone, but
It could have been my company or.
That's right,
We
it could have been
routinely have
Yellowstone.
our CEO and his entire family on the airplane.
yeah, they could have been in the
routinely.
back, and they could have been gone in a flash of a second.
Well, I'll make a motion, but I'd like the members to consider a modification to that motion if they feel that that is appropriate. So in an attempt to take into consideration everyone's view, for starters, I would suggest a suspension of driving privileges on the airport for the two individuals in question for a period of not less than 6 months. And at the conclusion of that 6 months, then they should be invited either by phone conversation or by certified letter to make an appointment to come to the airport manager's office together and to discuss what happened on July 26th or 25th?
26th.
26th, okay. And key to that discussion would be, number one, accepting responsibility for what occurred, and to be frank and honest about what we have proof that has happened, and then to receive instruction from the airport manager as to what it's going to take to reinstate those privileges. And I think that that meeting should be held in the presence of the chairman of the airport authority. But that the airport manager should conduct that meeting, but the chairman should be free to comment as he sees fit. That is my motion.
Okay. Thank you, Harlow. Do we have a second to that motion or any questions or additions?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir, Stan.
I don't agree with them discussing, we know what they did. They're not going to admit it, I don't believe.
If
And
they don't admit it, they don't
They don't
drive
get their
on the
driving
airport.
privileges back.
that's apples and oranges. They're not going to admit it.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, I think we just do what you said up to that point. It's up to them. But if you expect a discussion, I think you're way out of line. I mean, I don't mean out of line. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I would just respectfully submit that my motion stands, that if they do not do that, then they do not drive on the airport again.
Yeah, they forfeit their driving privileges then.
So those privileges would be held in abeyance until such time as they did so.
Hey, Carl, did I hear you second that motion?
I did second that motion.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about it? Okay. If not, we're going to hold a vote on this. The motion would be to suspend the driving privileges of Mr. Rebusel and Mr. Sampson for a period of 180 days from July 26th. At the end of that 180-day period, the two gentlemen have the right to appear before the airport manager and chairman of the airport authority to discuss the event and rectify their statements, to admit their wrongdoing, and tell us how they're going to remedy the situation going forward.
Not only do they have the right to appear, by ruling of this authority.
They
I'm-
must.
I'm moving that they must appear.
Yeah, they
and
must
that they must
appear.
accept responsibility and discuss how this will be remediated when their driving privileges are reinstated, should they be.
Okay, so we clear on that, Danielle? Okay,
And that you yourself must be present or your representative.
absolutely. I have no issue with that, Arlo. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Yes, no, I say no.
Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries. Airport managers report?
Okay. So we had a 4% decrease annually in fuel sales, but I found it interesting that we did have an increase in 100 low lead. So general aviation was pretty active. Some of the things that I've been working on, one thing is preparation for clerical assistance. So in order for me to be able to dedicate more time to projects and airport management tasks and the upcoming audit, I've started the process to hire service to aid with clerical office work. The monthly expenses will not exceed $2,500, which would require approval from the treasurer. And also the contract will be month to month, so it can be canceled at any time. We identified a taxiway sign on the airport that is actually incorrect. So there is a taxiway sign that shows Bravo where it is in fact Delta 3. So a short portion of taxiway was changed from Bravo to Delta 3 as a part of a previous project, and this sign was not identified as needing to be changed as a part of that project. So Armstrong is now working to find a solution for us. I've decided to leave the sign in place because even though it says the wrong taxiway, it does indicate to pilots that there is in fact a taxiway there to make sure they're watching for oncoming aircraft. This change to Delta 3 has not actually taken place with the FAA yet. That'll be in November. So hopefully we have this rectified before it's changed formally on the FAA diagram. It should show up as changed in ForeFlight prior to then, though. It actually might already be updated in ForeFlight.
Question on that? Are you aware if those, if they're all black graphics, right, on yellow right now? That's what they are?
Yeah,
Are they a vinyl application or are they a paint of some type?
it's like a vinyl application on the back of the acrylic plastic.
If you want as a short term, I have that vinyl application material. We could do something to make it more clear until you get the permanent solution if necessary.
I did identify a way to correct it, but by doing so, well, it wouldn't be correcting it. It would be removing the indication of the direction of the taxiway, but not adding a sign that shows the correct taxiway designation. So then pilots wouldn't be aware that there's a taxiway there. In order to add the correct designation to the sign, we need more space
Oh.
than what's currently available.
Got it.
So we only have the one choice of removing the arrow, and I think that would cause more of a hazard than prevent. But thank you, though.
If you had never said anything, nobody would have ever known.
Nobody would have ever known, that's for sure, because you would never notice it.
I will say that how it's marked right now makes a lot of sense. Bravo comes all the way down.
It
Goes
does.
right up to the runway, so whether it's 6 of this or half a dozen of the other, I think we're
No
in
one
good-
knows the difference.
we're in good shape. So however it is, we're good until we change it.
Yeah. So we're actively working on it because that really should have been identified as a part of a federal project. Our engineer is working to find the best, most reasonable solution for us. Over this past weekend, I completed a scouting mission and identified the obstruction in the lean engineering aeronautical survey for the nighttime approach. It was a fun project, and now I know exactly which bush is penetrating the protected airspace for the nighttime approach. It is quite a ways out there on BLM property. It penetrates the airspace by 1 foot. It's amazing the level of precision that we've got with this survey. I was able to, we weren't able to get visual of it, but as a Part 107 commercial drone operator myself, I was able to utilize my drone to identify precisely which bush it is. Now I'm working on trying to figure out if we can physically get to that thing on foot without special equipment. If we can, we could potentially remove the bush ourselves, saving the airport potentially a significant amount of money, because I would imagine that a contractor would do this with a helicopter. So it'd probably be.
Do we need BLM permission to remediate said bush?
Yes, we absolutely do. Our engineering consultant is working on that. They have the appropriate connections with BLM to establish that.
It's a shame that your drone didn't fly a little too close when its rotor may have taken the top foot off of the bush.
Yeah, that would be a BLM violation, regulation violation. So we didn't violate any BLM regs while we were out there. Made sure that all regulations are followed, and we need permission for 2 things. We really need to get a motorized vehicle closer than what the trails allow for, and we need to be able to remove it, and those both require BLM authorization. But yeah, it's 1 foot. It's something else, but I think we'll find a solution. We'll definitely find a solution for it. It was a fun project. It was way out there. Got to use some of my skills that I don't normally get to use, so that's great. And I will update y'all as we find the appropriate solution to get that thing removed, and then we can move forward with that project. This is actually kind of a time-sensitive item because the phase 2 design kind of depends on this being removed. We need to get this, make it to where there's no restrictions to getting this approved. So,
I mean, I shudder to already know what you're about to say as a response, but does this seriously have to hold up the next phase of this while we resolve what will obviously be resolved?
it would hold it up.
I know. I just had to ask.
And Carl, just as a point, Corey and I are coming up with all sorts of possible ways of getting it done. We just want to make sure we don't violate something doing it, that's all. It's not going to be hard to do it. It's just, we don't want to get in trouble.
Remember, there are, what's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are resources
Is this in the
available.
Christmas tree cutting area?
No, it appears to be a juniper tree, but we have resources available, and I just conferred with Vice Chairman Pewlitz, and we can talk offline about what resources we might have available to remediate the problem.
There is the potential
Once permission is secured.
there is the potential that BLM may actually help us. So we're going to ask for permission, and we're going to ask for their assistance in any way they can help. They may already have the technical expertise required to get the job done, and they might chop that foot off for us. In reality, all the vegetation on top of that peak should be removed so that it doesn't cause future penetration issues. So that would be the ideal. But there's really only about 2 or 3 bushes that would need to be removed to prevent any potential future obstruction. So it's just getting to it. It's really in a tough spot to get to.
Maybe if you got the 2 flat tires fixed.
Maybe so. Volunteers, there's a lot of people that are willing to volunteer to help with this project, so it's a fun one. Any other questions about that one? So let's see here. September 11th, 2022, the local Nevada Jeep Club plans on using the south parking lot at the airport as a staging area for their memorial drive around the area. They did call and ask permission to do that. They'll be out there for, they assume, about an hour prior to the ride, and then they'll end their ride at the airport. They won't at any time have access to the airport. They'll just be in the parking lot just south of the terminal. They expect to have about 100 vehicles, and they did this last year, and they didn't have any safety problems or concerns or anything. I did a review of some of the safety data sheets for the stored chemicals at the airport. After that review, it was determined that an eye wash station is actually needed at the airport. Rick Lee was able to purchase one and do an installation on the utility sink that he also put in. So we now have an eye wash station at the airport terminal, which covers us for any potential employer regulation issues. This is also really good because on the south side of the airfield, if any pilots have any problems with fueling, or if any of our FBOs have any issues with fueling, they now will have access to an eye wash station where they can get 15 minutes of continuous eye wash, which surpasses all of the OSHA requirements. I worked with our internet service provider, Preferred Networks, to make our internet connection more reliable. Last month, we experienced a 2-week outage that also was intermittent following those 2 weeks. Luckily, we had a very generous airport tenant who helped us establish a backup internet connection. That got us online during that outage. But now, Preferred Networks has reconfigured their network so that our connection is now coming from Carson City instead of Reno. There is about 6 points of wireless connection between us and the source of our connection through the mountain range, all the way from Reno. If there was a problem with any point of that, we had an outage. Now we have 1 point of connection and is directly to the source. The connection is about 10 times as fast as it used to be, and it's also, they're going to charge us $20 less per month for the connection. And now I also was able to set up an automatic fallback system. So we're going to keep the backup that was provided to us by the airport tenant in place, and I was able to configure the network to automatically utilize that backup in the event of a future outage. And then the system will automatically return to the primary connection when it becomes available again. So hopefully this resolves the network reliability problems that we've been having. I know this outage last month was really bad, but it's been a continual issue. Now we're going to have the bandwidth, more than enough bandwidth than what we'll need, and hopefully that AWAS stays reporting pretty much consistently. At this point, we'd have to have some sort of major equipment outage internally, or a major internet outage to where both our primary and backup connection are out. And technically that has happened before, so it's still possible. Just our uptime should be pretty good with what we've got. And we'll continue to troubleshoot the new system. This is a brand new system for our internet service provider, and they set it up essentially just for us as the first customer using this system. And we'll continue to improve on it as far as bandwidth. Airport operations for July were 2,603 according to the ADSB data, and detailed charts are available below. And that is all that I have.
Steve, do you have anything to report, legal counsel report?
I do not.
Okay. Our treasurer is absent today, and we don't have the report, which is okay. Any reports from airport authority members?
Mr. Chairman? Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Paul.
Go ahead, Harlow.
Go ahead, Harlow.
I asked counsel if he had a copy of the airport authority bylaws. And I know that those originated, I've been around about 21 years, and so it must be before that. So it must be almost 30 years. Might have been even with Bob Thomas. But council has some recollection of that and says that they reference a particular version of Robert's Rules of Orders. So I was hoping that we might be able to get a copy of that for you to look at, Mr. Chairman. And we might want to use a later version, or there may be something in there that needs to be updated. But I thought it would be helpful, if you concur, Mr. Chairman, for the board members to know what those bylaws are.
I am very familiar with them. Not necessarily the most current version, but quite familiar with Robert's Rules of Order. And if we want to implement that for the entire airport authority, I'm good with it. We're pretty close as it is anyways.
That's where we may be headed, I think, but I'd like you to look at it, you know,
Sure.
if council can find that, you know, then looking at the most current version. I didn't know there were different versions of Robert's Rules, but evidently there are.
Actually, it's set forth in the Carson City Municipal Code, Title 19, and I sent you the reference earlier this evening. So you asked me the question.
Okay,
I sent you an email with the site to the section, the Carson City Municipal Code, but it's set forth right in the Carson City Municipal Code, Title 19, the Robert's Rules of Order, and I think it's version 10, but I can send that reference to all of you.
so that's governing now.
That's correct. That's been adopted by both the airport authority and the city for
Okay,
use
all right.
for the airport authority.
I
So-
looked, you know, I guess I'm
Yeah.
ashamed to admit, but I didn't see it, so that's the reason I asked the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Harlow. Anyone else? I know, Paul, you wanted to opine on something?
When we had our one smoke event, I was getting ready to go flying, and the AWAS is reading 2.5 miles visibility. I look out there with the smoke, I could see at least 5 miles visibility. So I did a little research, and I guess our AWAS is not made for smoke. It's only made for moisture. Now, part of the problem here is that if we've got 5 miles visibility and any one of you wants to be coming in and it's, you know, so reads less than 1 mile visibility, then you're gonna divert. So part of the problem was solved here. Corey and I talked about this and what are some of the solutions. And you know, one of us, when you teach students, you listen to the AWAS, and that AWAS is what you fly by. Well, so we decided that we were going to change the airport facility directory and say that it's inaccurate. The AWAS is inaccurate with smoke. Meanwhile, I'm trying to put a little bit more responsibility on the FAA. They just say, well, that's the way it is. Well, we live in a world of smoke, okay? We do not really live in a world of moisture. So that's kind of an ongoing project, and I haven't got a lot of help with the FAA, but I'm trying to move some of that responsibility onto them.
Well,
So we'll see where that goes. But we do at least have a temporary solution now with letting our patrons know that the AWAS is not accurate for smoke.
if I might make an observation, Mr. Chairman.
I think you're going to say what I was going to say.
Well,
You can say it instead of
the
me.
AWAS 3PT, which I think is what it is an automated issuance, of weather. And does the forecast and things like smoke come from a certificated weather observer employed by the National Weather Service. If we had a tower, we would have that. But since we do have a forecast, that observation is being made for us by the National Weather Service office in Reno. Otherwise, we would not have a forecast. You don't get that from the automated service provided by the AWAS. And I guess in order for them to issue a visibility with Sierra Mike smoke, they would actually have to be here to make that observation rather than do it from Reno.
No, the AWAS has sensors that point down.
But there's no reflectivity.
That's the issue. And I don't want this to get into a big
Yeah.
discussion here. Let me, Carl, I know you want to say something. Just hang tight for a minute. AWAS systems do not report smoke accurately. It's known throughout the entire country, throughout the world, because smoke doesn't have reflective particles. And the problem is, if you state in the AFD that the AWAS is unreliable, okay, and somebody decides that, oh, the airport said it's, yeah, is unreliable for smoke, and smoke conditions are persisting, and you choose to fly in and disregard the AWAS, and you have an incident or worse, insurance isn't going to cover it, and airport insurance will get hit. So I think we need to have this conversation offline, not in this setting. Yeah, Carl?
I don't disagree with what you just said. I mean, I think kind of just amplifying Paul's initial comment, for those of us operating Part 91, it's at our discretion when flying the instrument approach, which we're going to assume we're doing in this case, whether to initiate the instrument approach, even if you have a weather reporting system like an AWAS that shows below minimums, right? But for Part 135 or for Part 121, if there were those operations, that would prohibit initiation of the approach or proceeding beyond the final approach fix. And that could create a undue, kind of false positive, right? That would unduly hinder certain operations. The challenge, though, first off, as Harlow said, as an alternate, for filing as an alternate, you're looking at the forecast, or for the need to file an alternate, you're looking at the forecast. And that's where human beings, as you say, Harlow, come into the picture up at NWS. But, I'm not fully expert on the 135 and 121 rules as they pertain to automated weather systems, but I think you are taking that as the source of 1 minute weather at the airport and would have to make a procedure, a decision to proceed with a procedure based on that. The question really comes down to, is there some super AWAS that actually is accurate for smoke? And barring that, I think you've just illustrated something I'd never thought about, but we're not the only ones dealing with this. So I'm kind of curious as to how that is handled in the wider world.
Again, probably a conversation for another time. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments from Airport Authority members? Okay, I don't see any public comment. And any agenda items you want to make us aware of for the next meeting? Corey, anything coming up that we should be thinking about?
Stellar Aviation is going to try to have their fuel farm proposal for the next board meeting. And they're aware of the time constraints, so we'll see if they make that deadline.
Okay, fair enough. With that, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everyone.